There's a particular kind of trembling that has nothing to do with cold. It is the trembling of a body that knows something the mind is still catching up to, a physical intelligence that registers significance before the conscious self has finished processing it. It is the trembling of someone standing at the edge of a moment that will divide their life into before and after. Maya Reeves was 32 years old, and she had been shaking since the moment she walked onto the Family Feud stage. Not visibly, not in the theatrical way of someone performing nerves for an audience. The shaking was internal, a fine, constant vibration that she recognized from exactly two other moments in her life. The first was the morning she sat in a hospital waiting room while her mother was in surgery. The second was the afternoon she had finally accepted, after 3 years of hoping otherwise, that the man she loved was not coming back. Both of those moments had ended. Both of them had marked her in ways that were permanent and generative, the scar tissue of a life that had not been gentle, worn by a woman who had decided to wear it honestly. She did not know, as she stood at the podium under the studio lights, that she was about to enter a third moment of that kind. She did not know that Steve Harvey had information she did not have. She did not know that the shaking in her body was not nerves, it was preparation. When Steve Harvey said turn around slowly, Maya Reeves would understand what her body had known from the beginning, that some moments announce themselves before they arrive, in the language of trembling, in the grammar of inexplicable readiness for something you cannot yet name. Maya Reeves grew up in Richmond, Virginia, the younger of 2 daughters raised by her mother, Charlene, a licensed practical nurse who worked the overnight shift at a long-term care facility for 23 years, so that her daughters could attend schools in a better district and have the specific kind of stability that requires sustained, invisible sacrifice to maintain. Maya had understood this sacrifice abstractly as a child and concretely as an adult, which is the usual order of things, and which had produced in her a quality of gratitude that was not performative but structural, built into the way she moved through the world, the way she treated people in service roles, the way she spoke about her mother. She had graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University with a degree in social work, and had spent the following decade doing exactly that social work, in the specific and demanding form of a child welfare case manager in Richmond's Department of Social Services. It was work that required everything she had, and then asked for more, and she gave it with the full knowledge of what it cost, and the equally full conviction that the cost was worth paying. Her colleagues described her as the person they wanted on the hardest cases. Her supervisor had tried 3 times to move her into an administrative role. She had declined 3 times on the grounds that the desk was further from the children. She had met a man named Darius Cole at a community fundraiser when she was 26. He was a high school history teacher who coached the debate team, and whose combination of intellectual seriousness and irreverent humor had distinguished him, in Maya's estimation, from virtually every person she had previously encountered at a community fundraiser. They had been together for 4 years, 4 years of the ordinary intimacy of 2 people building a life around shared values, disagreeing productively, learning the specific grammar of each other's needs. She had been, by her own honest assessment, happier than she had been at any other point in her adult life. Then Darius had received a fellowship, a significant one, a 2-year research and teaching fellowship at a university in Cape Town, South Africa, examining post-apartheid civic education. It was, by any measure, a significant professional honor, the kind of opportunity that arrives once and does not return. Maya had known this. She had also known, and had been honest with herself about knowing, that saying yes to the fellowship would mean 2 years of long distance across 12 time zones, and that long distance across 12 time zones at age 30 was a different proposition than the same arrangement might have been at 22. They had talked about it for weeks. Darius had said he wanted her to come. Maya had looked at her caseload, 37 children, some of them in situations that required continuity of relationship that could not be handed off without consequence, and had said she could not go. Darius had said he understood. He had gone. The first year had been manageable. The second year had been harder. The fellowship had been extended by 6 months, which neither of them had anticipated, and the extension had done something to the already strained architecture of a relationship being maintained across 12 time zones. They had ended things mutually and with genuine love and genuine grief when Darius was still in Cape Town. He had said he would be back. Maya had said she knew. They had not specified what back meant or whether it meant anything about them. That had been 14 months ago. Maya had heard from Darius twice since, once a brief message when he returned to the United States, once a longer message at the holidays that she had read several times and responded to in one sentence. She had not been cruel, and she had not been cold. She had been honest in the way of someone who is protecting a wound that has not finished healing and knows that contact before healing is complete will not serve either person. She had been protecting it for 14 months. Her older sister, Keisha, had entered the family in Family Feud 4 months ago. The team was 5. Maya, Keisha, their mother Charlene, Keisha's husband Devin, and their cousin Patris, who had driven from Raleigh specifically and had been preparing for this occasion with the competitive focus of someone who treats every game as a matter of personal honor. What Maya did not know was that Keisha had made a phone call 6 weeks earlier. She had found Darius Cole's number through a mutual friend, had called him on a Thursday evening, and had told him, directly and without preamble, 3 things. That her sister still had every message he had ever sent her in a folder she had not deleted, that Maya had told her once that Darius was the only person she had ever known who made her feel like her most complete self, and that if he had any intention of doing anything about any of this, now was his moment. Darius had listened to all 3 things. Then he had said, "Tell me what I need to do." The production team had made the arrangements. Charlene, who had been told, had sat with it for one evening and then called Keisha and said, yes. Devin had been briefed. Patris had not been told because Patris could not keep a secret, and everyone who knew her understood this about her. Darius was in the building. The shaking had started in the parking lot. Maya had attributed it to nerves, the reasonable nerves of someone who has not appeared on television before, in a bright studio, in front of an audience. She had managed it with the same internal tools she used when walking into difficult home visits. 3 slow breaths, the reminder that she was competent in unfamiliar rooms, the decision to be present rather than managed. The shaking had not responded to any of these techniques, which she noted with the detached curiosity of a social worker who is accustomed to observing herself. She had concluded that it was simply adrenaline, more acute than expected, and filed the observation and moved on. Steve Harvey worked the team with his characteristic ease in the pre-show segment. Patris was everything Patris's family had promised she would be: loud, warm, absolutely certain of herself. Hilarious in a way that owed nothing to self-awareness and everything to genuine confidence. Charlene, 23 years of overnight shifts visible in the quality of her composure, fielded Steve's questions with the dry precision of a woman who has seen too much to be easily ruffled and has chosen serenity over performance. Devin and Keisha presented as what they were, a solid, quietly happy couple who had each other's timing. When Steve reached Maya, she noticed that his pace shifted in the way she had registered in the first minutes of watching him work the room, a slight deceleration, a focusing of attention that was qualitatively different from the broad, energetic engagement he brought to the group exchanges. "How are you feeling?" he asked, not as a formula, as a question. "Nervous," she said. "You've been shaking since you walked in," Steve said, directly, not unkindly. Maya looked at him with brief surprise, not at the accuracy of the observation which she had made herself, but at its directness. "Yes," she said. "You do this often, shake when you're nervous?" "No," she said. "Actually, no, this is unusual." "Interesting," Steve said, in a tone that suggested he found it interesting for reasons that were not entirely about nerves. He moved on in the way he moved on from things he had not finished with, and the main game began. The game itself was good. Patris was magnificent in 2 rounds and entirely counterproductive in one, the latter providing the episode's best comic moment when her fast money answer, confident, instantaneous, and comprehensively wrong, caused Devin to make a sound that the closed captioning later described simply as laughter. Maya was focused and precise, the social worker's instinct for reading a room surfacing usefully in the survey-based logic of the game. Charlene, in the final round, delivered a run of 3 correct answers with the serenity of someone for whom this was not the most demanding thing she had done this week. The Reeves family won with a comfortable margin. During the celebration, Maya noticed that Keisha was holding her hand a beat longer than the moment required. She noticed that her mother was watching her with an expression that was slightly too still for pure celebration. She filed these observations with the same detached precision she filed everything, and she did not yet draw the conclusion they were pointing toward. Steve Harvey let the celebration find its level. Then he walked to center stage. "Maya," he said. She looked at him. The shaking, she realized, had not stopped during the game. It had simply become part of the background, absorbed into the concentration of play. It was fully present again now. "I want to ask you something," Steve said. "Okay," she said. "Tell me about the last time you felt like your most complete self." The question arrived with the specific precision of something that had been aimed. Maya looked at him. Keisha, in her peripheral vision, was very still. Charlene was very still. Maya knew in the way she knew things before she knew them, in the body, in the vocabulary of trembling, that something was happening. She did not know what, she knew it was happening. "I was with someone," she said, carefully, "about 2 years ago, before things changed." "What made you feel complete?" "He paid attention," she said. The simple answer, the honest one, the one that required no elaboration for anyone who had ever experienced it, and no elaboration for Steve Harvey, who had spent 30 years paying attention to what people said and did not say. He paid full attention to everything. He made me feel like the most interesting room he had ever been in. The studio was quiet. "What happened to him?" Steve asked. "He went somewhere he needed to go," Maya said. "Then we tried to stay together from a distance, and the distance was too large." A pause. "And then it was over." "Do you think it's over?" Steve asked, quietly, directly, the question underneath the question. Maya was silent for several seconds. The shaking was pronounced now, not visible, but she was certain Steve Harvey could see it. "I don't know," she said, honest, finally, fully honest. "I put things in a folder. I didn't delete the folder." Steve Harvey looked at her for one long moment. "Maya," he said, "I want you to turn around. I want you to turn around slowly, because the moment you're about to have, I don't want you to rush it." She turned around slowly. The instruction had been specific, and she followed it with the specific quality of someone who understands at a cellular level that the instruction is right, that this moment is not one to be rushed, that the turning itself is part of what is happening, that the journey from not knowing to knowing is meaningful and should be inhabited rather than skipped. Darius Cole was standing at the back of the stage. He was 34 years old. He was wearing the dark green shirt that Maya had bought him for his birthday 3 years ago, a detail so deliberate and so precisely calibrated to her that she understood immediately it was not accidental, that he had packed it specifically, that he had thought about what she would see when she turned around. He was standing very still, in the manner of a man who has been still for a long time, 14 months of stillness, of waiting for the right moment, which had turned out to require a phone call from her sister and a production team in Los Angeles and a building he had never been inside until this afternoon. Maya turned fully and looked at him. The shaking resolved not into stillness, but into something different, the vibration of a string that has found its note. She said nothing for a long moment. Neither did he. Then she said, "You packed the green shirt." Darius looked at her with the expression of a man who has been rehearsing this moment for 14 months and has just discovered that nothing he rehearsed is what is actually happening, which is better than anything he rehearsed. "I packed the green shirt," he said. "You're here. I'm here. Why didn't you just call me?" "I called your sister," he said. "She told me that what you needed was not a phone call." Maya looked at her sister. Keisha met her gaze with the unrepentant expression of someone who has done something significant on another person's behalf and stands entirely behind the decision. Maya held her gaze for one moment, the full, complex, decades-long exchange of two sisters who have been each other's primary witness, and then she turned back to Darius. "The folder," she said. "I know about the folder," he said. "Keisha told me. She had no right to tell you that." "No," he said, "but she did anyway. Because she knows you, and I think she was right." He paused. "Maya, I spent 14 months understanding what I lost, not abstractly, specifically. I know what I lost, and I'm not here to ask you to restore something. I'm here because I want to know whether there's something new that's possible, something that accounts for the 14 months and everything in them." He paused again. "I'm here because the green shirt was the first thing I packed, and I think that tells both of us something." Maya Reeves was not a woman who cried easily. She had managed 14 months and 37 children and 23 years of watching her mother leave for overnight shifts, and the specific discipline of a life in which a great deal depended on her composure. She had also, for the past 4 years of knowing this man, cried in front of him more freely than she had cried in front of anyone. She had decided early in the relationship that he was a room in which the composure was not required. She had missed that room for 14 months with a specificity she had not been able to fully acknowledge until this moment. She walked toward him, not slowly this time. The embrace was not tentative. It was the embrace of two people who have missed each other in the particular, specific way that only a defined and known person is missed, not the abstract missing of someone who was once present, but the concrete, detailed missing of a person whose particular way of holding you has been absent for 14 months and is now, suddenly, present again. Charlene, in the front row, closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her face carried the expression of a woman who has spent 23 years working overnight shifts so her daughter could have the best possible version of her own life, and who is watching her daughter standing in that version. Patris, who had not been told anything, was experiencing a delayed but comprehensive understanding of the afternoon's full significance. She looked at Devon. Devon nodded. Patris said, in a voice not quite as quiet as intended. I knew something was happening. Steve Harvey stood to the side of the stage. He had not spoken since the instruction. He had watched the turning, the recognition, the shirt, the folder, the exchange, and the walking toward without rushing. He had watched the embrace. He had let all of it be exactly what it was without frame or narration. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet and entirely at rest. No performance in it, no entertainment register, just a man who has just watched something he genuinely believes in. I told her to turn around slowly, he said, because I have learned over a long time of doing this that the moments you cannot rush are the ones that matter most. The moments where you have to let yourself arrive step by step into something you've been walking toward for a long time without knowing it. He paused. Maya, you were shaking when you walked in today. I noticed it because I notice things, and what I thought when I noticed it was, that is not a nervous body, that is a ready body. A body that knows something is coming. He looked at her. Your body was right. The episode aired on a Wednesday evening. Within 24 hours, the clip had been viewed 42 million times, and the conversation it generated was distinctive in that it was not primarily a conversation about the reunion. It was a conversation about the instruction, turn around slowly. The specificity of the word slowly, the decision to slow the moment down, to make it inhabited rather than rushed, to insist that Maya arrive in the full awareness of what she was moving toward, was analyzed and discussed and shared in a way that exceeded the reunion moment itself. Therapists noted it. Writers noted it. People who had experienced significant emotional moments in their own lives noted it and sent it to people they loved with the message. This is the thing. The reason to not rush the turning. The phrase became a kind of shorthand in online communities for the practice of allowing significant moments their full weight, of not reflexively speeding through vulnerability to resolution, of letting yourself be present in the movement between states. Teachers shared it in classrooms as an example of emotional intelligence applied in real time. A grief counselor used it in a widely shared essay about the experience of loss as a turning, about how people rush the turning away from grief toward reconstruction, and how the most important thing is often to turn slowly, to be present in the movement, to not skip the arrival. Maya and Darius did not give interviews. They issued no statement. What the public received was what Steve Harvey's production team confirmed at the standard 6-month follow-up interval, that the two individuals involved were, in the team's characterization, doing well. That was all. That was, in fact, more than enough. What was not public was the conversation Maya and Darius had in the parking lot of the studio that evening, sitting in his rental car for an hour before driving to dinner. It was not a simple conversation. It was the conversation that the 14 months required, honest, nonlinear, covering terrain that neither of them could have covered in a phone call, because a phone call would have allowed certain truths to be managed in ways that proximity did not permit. They talked about what the fellowship year had cost each of them. They talked about the things they had each learned in the 14 months that they could not have learned inside the relationship. They talked about whether the things they had learned were compatible, whether two people who had each become somewhat more themselves in the absence of the other could find a form that honored both evolutions rather than asking either person to revert. The answer, arrived at across an hour in a parking lot and many subsequent conversations, was yes, but only if they were honest about what the form needed to look like. The relationship that emerged was more explicitly negotiated than the one that had preceded it. They had both become people who required honesty about needs and limits rather than the more organic, assumed accommodation of their first 4 years. This was, by their joint assessment, an improvement, though an effortful one. Keisha Coleman never apologized for making the call to Darius, and Maya never asked her to. The question of whether Keisha had overstepped was settled between them in a single conversation that lasted 20 minutes, during which Maya said, "You had no right," and Keisha said, "I know," and Maya said, "Thank you," and Keisha said, "I know that too." After that, the matter was closed, as most matters between sisters who have been each other's primary witness for 3 decades are closed, not through resolution of the question, but through the shared acknowledgement that the relationship is larger than the question. Charlene Reeves, who had worked overnight shifts for 23 years and had asked for very little in return except to see her daughters arrive safely at their own versions of a full life, said only one thing to Maya about the afternoon. She said it the following Sunday on the phone in the quiet that preceded their usual exchange of practical updates. She said, "I saw your face when you turned around. I have waited a long time to see your face look like that." Maya had said, "I know, Mom." Charlene had said, "Good." Then they had talked about other things. Patris, who had not been told about the arrangement, spent several weeks processing the experience of having been in the room for something significant without knowing she was in it. She told the story at every opportunity for the following year. The story improved with each telling, which is the natural evolution of a good story told by someone who appreciates one. Steve Harvey referenced the turn around slowly instruction in a later conversation about his approach to the show. He said that the instinct had come from watching Maya shake and understanding that her body was not producing nervousness but anticipation, that something in her was already oriented toward what was coming, and that if he simply said turn around, the speed of the turning would dissipate the very thing her body had been building. He said, "Some moments need a container." The instruction was the container. You say turn around slowly and you are telling the person, take your time, this is real, you are allowed to be fully present in it. He said one more thing, which was that Maya's description of Darius, "He made me feel like the most interesting room he had ever been in," was one of the most accurate definitions of love he had heard in many years of listening to people describe it. He said, when someone makes you feel like the most interesting room they have ever been in, that is not charm and that is not flattery. That is the specific work of attention. That is someone choosing to be fully present to you. And if you have experienced that and lost it and found it again, do not rush the turning. Maya Reeves returned to her caseload in Richmond. She continued to be the person her supervisor wanted on the hardest cases. She continued to decline the administrative role, though she negotiated a partial arrangement that allowed her to mentor newer case managers without leaving the field entirely, which was a compromise she considered adequate. She and Darius settled into the relationship that the parking lot conversation had sketched, deliberately, honestly, with the full awareness of two people who know the cost of inattention and have decided to pay attention. She deleted the folder. Not because she no longer needed it. She had kept it for 14 months for reasons that were real and that she did not repudiate, but because the thing the folder represented, the open question it had been holding, had been answered. She moved its contents to a different folder, which she named differently, and which was not a repository of uncertainty but a record of a particular span of time that had been difficult and important and had produced, in its outcome, something she was glad to be living inside. The shaking never fully left her. That was something she told Darius eventually, that she still sometimes experienced the fine, constant vibration she had felt in the parking lot and on the stage in moments of significance. That she had come to understand it not as anxiety but as a form of knowing, a physical intelligence that registered importance before the mind caught up. Darius had said, "I know, I feel it too," she had said, when he had said, "right now." They had been standing in her kitchen on a Saturday morning, and the light was coming through the window at the angle it came through on Saturday mornings, and there was nothing significant happening and everything significant happening, which is the way it tends to be in a life that is being paid full attention to, in a relationship between two people who have decided that the most interesting room either of them has ever been in is the room where the other person is. She turned around slowly. She had learned to do that. She intended to keep doing it. If this story moved you, like it and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and never miss a story like this one.